Hello, it's great to be here in Zaragoza. I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days. I'm looking forward first of all to this evening and speaking to a large room full of educators about the future of education, why education has to be different, and how we together can change the education system. You know, one of the things that we need to understand is that the future of education isn't simply to make the current system more efficient. We have to dramatically transform the entire education agenda, which means we have to take a step back and we have to create a new vision for the future of education. We have to understand the kinds of skills and behaviours and attitudes our children will need if they're not just to survive but thrive in the future. So over the next 2 days, I'm going to do a number of things. I'm going to share insights from a range of hugely successful people who talk about the kind of skills they're looking for as employers, as hugely successful entrepreneurs, the kind of skills they want to see in children coming through the education system. I'm going to be sharing examples of my own practice and my own thinking so that teachers can understand that this isn't just theory, this is reality as well. And as we go through the next 2 days, I want teachers to feel a sense of enthusiasm, of growing confidence, and more importantly than anything, I want them to feel a sense of a point that they can achieve, that they can go out and they can change their lessons in their classrooms, and by doing so little bit by little bit, they can change the systems in their schools. And if they can change the systems in their schools, then they can create a system that's worthy of their children. Then we together can build a world that our children can walk into and succeed in.
Buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a Ibercaja, al Patio de la Infanta, y también quiero extender mi bienvenida a las personas que están viendo esta conferencia o escuchando esta conferencia en el salón de abajo, debajo de nosotros. Hay 200 personas en estos momentos. Y luego también saludar especialmente a las personas que están en los centros, en nuestros centros culturales de Huesca, de Logroño y de Guadalajara, que están viendo la conferencia por streaming. Me acompañan para presentar esta conferencia de Creando hoy las escuelas del mañana, Ana Farré, directora del Patio de la Infanta y además responsable y organizadora de este ciclo Educar para el Futuro 2016. Y por supuesto nuestro invitado especial que ha levantado esta gran expectación, Richard Gerver. Welcome to Ibercaja, Richard.
Thank you.
Mi inglés no da por mucho más. Bien, hoy es un buen día. Hoy es un buen día para, desde la Obra Social de Ibercaja, agradecerles a ustedes y hacerles partícipe y transmisores de la felicidad y el agradecimiento, repito, de Ibercaja, de la Obra Social de Ibercaja, por el seguimiento y la atención que está teniendo todas las actividades que estamos desarrollando dentro de nuestra iniciativa Educar, y especialmente aquellas que realmente tienen que ver con la innovación educativa. Muchísimas gracias. Ver un salón así y ver la cantidad de gente que está viendo al ciclo, la cantidad de gente que está inscrita, realmente es muy estimulante. Realmente eso nos hace reafirmarnos y compartir con todos ustedes en que la educación es lo más importante. Sin educación no hay futuro. La educación realmente influye en el desarrollo de las personas, en el puesto de trabajo que van a ocupar, en muchísimas cosas. Hoy se está hablando de un concepto, algunos autores hablan de la nueva riqueza de las naciones. Y la nueva riqueza de las naciones la identifican con el talento. Y el talento sale de aplicar la inteligencia educación. Entonces, el talento es lo que realmente diferencia y hace progresar a las naciones. Y no se podrá tener talento si no tenemos un buen modelo educativo. Y realmente creo que todos coincidimos en que el actual modelo educativo, bueno, pues ha cumplido su función y necesita adaptarse a las nuevas necesidades. Y yo creo que un nuevo modo educativo no será el cambio bien si no se tienen en cuenta pues, las mejores prácticas que hay en el mundo, las mejores experiencias y sobre todo si no hay una complicidad entre profesores, entre alumnos, entre padres y entre instituciones. Y aquí juega el papel de Ibercaja. Ibercaja no puede hacer un modelo educativo, ni tiene competencia, ni le toca, ni es su función. Pero sí lo que hace Ibercaja es poner a disposición de los distintos elementos del sistema educativo lo mejor que puede, las mejores experiencias, servir de centro de reuniones, de centro de experiencias, y eso es lo que estamos haciendo. Por mi parte, poco más. Desear que el ciclo pues, discurra por lo menos como hoy, con el mismo éxito. Felicitar a Ana Farré realmente por cómo ha desarrollado el ciclo de este año y los de años anteriores. Yo en la presentación del ciclo dije que era realmente el mejor, el más internacional, el que mejores experiencias prácticas va a poner a disposición de nosotros, el que se ha abierto a más públicos que forman parte del sistema educativo. Realmente creo que nos vamos superando y sobre todo vamos dándoles a ustedes lo mejor que podemos. Por mi parte, nada más, y que siempre tendrán a la Obra Social de Ibercaja pues, colaborando con ustedes en esa labor educativa que es realmente trascendente. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Juan Carlos. Bienvenido, Mr. Gerver, que está el pobre que no oye bien, a ver si conseguimos que oiga la traducción, porque está interesado en escucharla. Bueno, bienvenidos a todos ustedes, como decía Juan Carlos, jefe de la Obra Social de Ibercaja. También damos la bienvenida pues, a las personas que nos están escuchando abajo en el Salón Rioja, a las personas que nos escuchan en Huesca, en Guadalajara y en Logroño. Comentaba Juan Carlos que para nosotros es una enorme satisfacción. Este año hemos dado un salto cualitativo importante en el programa de Educar para el Futuro, siendo no solo vamos a hablar de la necesidad de innovación, sino que nos hemos centrado en la innovación sostenible. Y antes Juan Carlos agradecía pues, el haber hecho posible el programa. El programa se ha hecho posible porque hay muchas personas muy competentes, profesionales, a los que quiero agradecer desde aquí hoy toda su colaboración incondicional desde el principio en el diseño y en la puesta en marcha del programa. Pues desde la Asociación Aragonesa de Psicopedagogía, la Fundación Piquer, FEUSO, Escuelas Católicas de Aragón, FECAPA, Anaquel Digital, MT, SM, Santillana, la Fundación San Valero, Escalae, etcétera, ¿no? Y otras personas a título personal pues, que también han colaborado con nosotros en la puesta en marcha de este programa. Y antes de presentar brevemente a Richard Gerver, quería comentar algunas cuestiones prácticas. Recordarles que pueden participar después de la ponencia de Richard Gerver en el coloquio. Las personas que están en la sala, pasaremos el micrófono, las azafatas que atienden la sala de hoy, y las personas que están en el Salón Rioja pueden hacerlo a través de unos tarjetones que también se les va a entregar. Las personas que están en los otros centros, que están siguiendo esta retransmisión por streaming, podrán hacerlo con el procedimiento que les indiquen en los centros, a través de una cuenta. Luego también comentarles que estas conferencias, las 9 conferencias del bloque 1 del programa, que son conferencias en las que hemos querido invitar a líderes mundiales que están poniendo en práctica grandes proyectos de innovación educativa, como el que hoy nos acompaña, Richard Gerver. Estas conferencias se graban en vídeo y estarán a su disposición en unos días en Aula en Red, en la página web de la Obra Social de Ibercaja. Junto a este primer bloque, nosotros también hemos querido, en este programa, dar protagonismo al nuevo modelo de profesor, al nuevo modelo de maestro. El nuevo modelo es un inductor de aprendizaje y el protagonista es el alumno. Nosotros aquí nos enorgullece mucho este programa porque pensamos que con este programa seguimos posicionando a Aragón en la innovación educativa. Hoy me enorgullece mucho saber que está aquí con nosotros César Bona y bueno, pues yo siempre que inicio la presentación de este programa, pues comento que desde la Obra Social no hacemos más que seguir posicionando a Aragón en la innovación educativa, porque bueno, pues el Global Teacher Prize en España salió de Aragón, y hoy pues a mí me ha llenado de satisfacción ver la conversación que han tenido antes de empezar la conferencia entre Richard Gerver y César Bona. Bueno, pues para eso hemos organizado una serie de cursos y de masterclass dirigidos a profesores, por ejemplo, pues el que dará Richard Gerver mañana aquí en el Patio de la Infanta. La semana que viene tenemos con nosotros a John Duñabeitia, que también, además de la conferencia, dará una masterclass sobre el lingüismo. Y sucesivamente, ¿no? Pues también vamos a tratar las matemáticas a través de la papiroflexia, o sea, todas las masterclass dirigidas a los docentes pienso que son muy innovadoras, ¿no? Y que los ponentes, bueno, pues son profesionales que están innovando ya, ¿no? En distintas áreas. También hemos querido innovar en cuanto a los públicos. Este año, pues además de dirigirnos a los profesores, a los maestros, a los docentes, nos dirigimos también a los equipos directivos, porque pensamos que la transformación también tiene que empezar por ellos. Y junto a los padres, a los que también dedicamos algunos programas, este año por primera vez hemos dedicado uno a los abuelos. Nos parece que, bueno, pues que son un miembro muy importante en la educación de los escolares, ¿no? Por eso también quiero hacer mención hoy a ellos. Y también damos entrada este año a los jóvenes a través de distintas actividades. Solo quiero mencionar tres. La mesa redonda YouTube, que me parece que va a ser muy interesante como instrumento educativo. El primer encuentro en Aragón que se va a producir de booktubers, que son esos prescriptores en las redes sociales, estos prescriptores jóvenes de la lectura. Y el proyecto Flip Classroom a raíz de la exposición nuestra de MENS. Es un proyecto muy interesante, hoy hay muchos docentes en la sala. Pienso que vale la pena bueno, pues que se lo planteen como un proyecto curricular del centro, porque la exposición de MENS, a partir de ahora, se abre como un proyecto curricular abierto, a través del que los estudiantes desde quinto de primaria hasta bachillerato pueden aprender matemáticas, filosofía, arte, lengua, etc., a través de las nuevas tecnologías y del proyecto Free Classroom. También comentarles que este año otro punto de innovación es que hemos introducido unos talleres didácticos para facilitar la conciliación familiar. Todos los padres que deseen, los niños desde infantil hasta los 11 años pueden participar en talleres didácticos simultáneos a las conferencias aquí en el Patio de la Infanta. También comentarles el cuadernillo 2015, que es el resumen que nosotros hacemos cada año de nuestras conferencias. Se pueden descargar en los QRs las conferencias del año pasado en el cuadernillo de 2015. Comentarles también que les hemos entregado un cuestionario final que nos gustaría mucho que nos hicieran llegar a la salida. Cada año nosotros elaboramos los programas contando con su opinión. Nos importa mucho. Y bueno, sin más, voy a dar paso a Richard Gerver y antes pues nombrar algunos rasgos de su currículum, yo creo que por todos conocidos. El profesor británico Richard Gerver es uno de los oradores más famosos del mundo. Sus ideas sobre el cambio y el liderazgo en educación son únicos gracias a su trabajo como director de la escuela primaria Grange. Su trabajo innovador en la educación le llevó a ser galardonado con premios como el British National de Enseñanza y de la UNESCO, entre otros. En uno de sus libros, bestseller, titulado Crear hoy la escuela del mañana, que podrán ustedes adquirir hoy también aquí en el Patio de la Infanta, describe exactamente cómo él y su equipo transformaron una escuela en decadencia en Inglaterra y vieron cómo en unos pocos años evolucionaba hasta alcanzar el éxito. Su transformador trabajo en la escuela primaria Grange constituye un ejemplo de cómo funcionan en la práctica los principios de personalización y adaptación. Cada escuela y cada niño son distintos y, por tanto, Gerver apunta que la tarea de los educadores consiste en aplicar estos principios de forma creativa. Gerver sigue trabajando en educación en todo el mundo. Ahora me comentaban que se pasan más días del año volando que en tierra, pues gracias a que hoy ha tomado tierra en Zaragoza, asesorando a diversas instituciones y con un importante reconocimiento a nivel internacional. Explora sobre los vínculos entre liderazgo, potencial humano e innovación. Gerver ha sido descrito como uno de los líderes más inspiradores de su generación. Sostiene que su trabajo se centra en 3 palabras: comunicación, capacitación e impacto. En 2011 fue galardonado con el título Orador de Negocios del Año y ha escrito, además del libro citado anteriormente, otro bestseller titulado El cambio, aprender a amarlo y a conducirlo. Asesora además a distintos gobiernos y corporaciones a nivel internacional. No quiero entretenerme más porque, bueno, pues hemos empezado un poco más tarde porque, bueno, pues hemos tenido que dar acceso a casi 600 personas en los 2 salones, más la traducción simultánea. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes y les dejo con Richard Gerver y al final daremos lugar al coloquio, como les decía. Gracias.
Good afternoon. Hola. That's my only Spanish. I'm English. It's amazing to be with you this afternoon, and it's amazing that you've given up your evening to come and spend it with me. So thank you all very, very much. I hope we're going to have fun in the next hour and a half. I plan to speak to you for about an hour, and then I think we're going to take some questions. So be thinking of some questions to ask me, because there's nothing more embarrassing than when we get to questions that everybody expects somebody else to ask the questions. Okay, so be thinking about questions as we go along. Now, I'm going to start this evening by sharing a story that I've told many times in the last year or so, because for me it best sums up the challenges that we face. Now I'm hoping, can someone make this work for me? This isn't working. Can somebody, technology? Thank you. Somebody can try and make, thank you. That best sums up the challenge that we face. Now, as I look around the room, I see people of many different ages here. All of you very young, obviously. I'm English, please. How many of you have got children of your own? Can you put up your hand if you have children? Thank you. Can you keep your hand in the air if you have currently got, or you have survived having, teenage children? Keep your hands in the air. I can tell you're the ones looking really tired this evening. And I understand why you're here, because why would you want to go home with teenage children there, right? I have 2 teenage children. It's why I spend my life traveling. I was in Canada last week, and I'm in Australia next week. I'm hoping never to go home again until they've left. I want to tell you about my son, my younger child. I'll do it, it's okay. We need to, I want to tell you about my son, my younger child, and I'll try and do this while there we go, that should work now. There we go. Who is 15 years old. So those of you that understand where I'm coming from, who have had 15-year-old sons, I'm so sorry. My 15-year-old son is just like everybody else's 15-year-old son. It's funny, isn't it? When you're an educator, everybody expects you to be a brilliant parent. I think I am a rubbish parent, because my son doesn't know how to speak properly in English. It happened when he turned 13. Before he was 13, he was brilliant. He was a lovely boy. He was polite. He used to say, "Good evening, Daddy. Good morning, Mummy." All the things. He was lovely. And then he became 13. And when he became 13, he started to behave like a primal man. He woke up on his 13th birthday like this. And he now doesn't talk to us. He just goes, And his arms do this. Have you noticed teenage boys? Their arms turn before their bodies do. This is my son. So let me tell you about something amazing about my son, right? When he comes home from school, he goes to his bedroom. And in his bedroom, my son has all the technology that apparently is going to turn him into a homicidal maniac. He has an Xbox in his bedroom. And he has a TV and a computer screen. His room looks like the place a James Bond villain would live, right? He has a big leather chair. And I promise you, when he turns round, I expect him to be stroking a white cat. So the other day, I had to go up to his bedroom to tell him it was time for dinner. I had to go up to his bedroom. I used to be able to text him on his cell phone, but he's now blocked my number from his cell phone. So now I have to go up to his bedroom. So I went up to his bedroom and I knocked on the door. There was no reply because he had his headphones on, right, with his thing here. So I went into his room and I stopped and watched him. And he was playing his favorite game on his Xbox, which is FIFA football, right? Now, I understood what was happening really quickly. But then I listened because he was talking to somebody on the other end of his headset. And what I heard amazed me. Because my son was talking to somebody on the other end of his headset in Russian. Now, this is amazing for many reasons. Mainly because we are British. We don't speak other languages. I mean, we think we do. Like tonight, I think I'm speaking Spanish because I'm going slowly and I'm speaking really loudly. So my son does not live in a house where people speak other languages. At school, he is learning French and Spanish. The thing that interests me about the way we teach languages in England is that he is an A-grade student in French and Spanish, but he can't speak a word of French and Spanish. However, he is talking to somebody on his headset in fluent Russian. Now, when he came off his computer game, I was stood there like a teenage boy in amazement. I was stood there like this. No! How? Right? And he did that thing, and oh, Dad, right? It turns out that he met a boy called Sergey, who lives in Moscow, playing FIFA in a European competition about 18 months ago. And he and Sergey became friends. And as they became friends, he and Sergey just started naturally talking to each other in their own languages. Andrew admitted to me that when they started their friendship, they just taught each other how to swear in their own languages. But now they've moved on, and they're learning to speak each other's language without having lessons, without having textbooks, without having a teacher stood in front of them in a classroom telling them what to learn and how to learn. My son has learnt one of Europe's most complicated languages in 1 year. Now, I don't know about you, but I would suggest that that is an unbelievable challenge to all of us in this room. Because a question we need to ask ourselves is this. If we keep teaching children in the way we were taught, why do our children need to bother? Because when we were taught by a teacher who stood at the front of a classroom, told us to open our books, told us to listen, told us to do our work, told us to remember what was said, and then we'd be tested in it. Our children can find that information in 100th of a second on the internet. Our children are learning from each other faster than we can teach them. Now, I don't know about you, but I would suggest that presents a real challenge for us. I, by the way, am not one of these people that thinks school has no place in the future. I passionately believe that schools will always be at the heart of education. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I go on. But if what we continue to do is to keep teaching the way we've always taught, our schools will become irrelevant. They will die. Students will stop coming because actually what they'll start to say to themselves is, I learn more when I'm not at school, so stop holding me back. This sets a real challenge for us. But it's not a challenge that's new. This is a challenge that has been around now for a number of years. And one of my great concerns with this challenge is that we've been talking about the future of education for maybe 30 or 40 years. People like me have stood in rooms like this for 30 or 40 years, talking to amazing teachers like you, where many people in the room are going, we agree, we need to do something about it. And then what happens, because I've been sat where you're sat now, then what happens is we go, I agree, let's wait for somebody to come along and tell us what to do. Some of you, and I'm really sorry if you have come here tonight hoping I am going to give you the answer. The truth about educators and educating into the next part of the future is, as a profession, we need to gain confidence in who we are. Everyone in this room is a professional. Everyone in this room has the instinct of an expert. Everyone in this room has the ability to take control of the future of learning for their students and find a way forward. What we have to stop doing is waiting for somebody else to come along and give us the answer. We haven't got time to do this exercise now. But as I'm talking, I wonder how many great new ideas you've had to live through in your time as a teacher. Great new ideas that somebody like me has come and told you about, and you've gone, right, that's the answer, let's do that. Sometimes it's been technology. I remember when we first got computers into school, just by having them apparently, we were going to transform education. Then somebody came along and told us about brain science. And we all went, right, that's the answer, brain science. So we all went away and learnt about brain science. And we thought, let's just do brain science, that's the answer. The problem is, we've lived in a world, because it's moving so fast, where we are desperate for somebody else to come along and give us the answer. And as a result, we have lived with thousands and thousands of silver bullets, new ideas prepared by somebody else that we as teachers are told to deliver, and that if we deliver these silver bullets, we'll transform the system for our children forever. And all that's really happened, in my opinion, is that as a profession, we've just become more and more confused. I work with so many teachers these days who have become skeptical, angry, exhausted by the change that keeps being dropped on top of them. And my first point this evening is that we have to take a step back. Because when I listen to policymakers and politicians talk about the future of education, they are making a very serious mistake. You see, most of what we discuss when we talk about education is actually based on how do we make the current system more efficient? How do we make it work better? So most of the ideas and the things that we're told to do aren't based on transforming education. They're just based on making what we already do work better. So the ridiculous arguments about the PISA International League tables, and we've got to be higher up, like somehow we're playing in a football tournament, that somehow we've got to be higher up the league tables, which means we need our children to be better at tests. Is that really the purpose of education? That's not education. And it's not about our children, and it's not about the future. It's about the egos of politicians and policymakers. So the system can't be about how do we make the system work better. What we need is a profession that has the confidence to say, hold on, maybe it's not working because the system itself is broken. Maybe what we need is a new system. What we need to stop doing as a profession is whenever we hear the word change, feeling a little bit sick in our stomach because we think, uh-oh, it's just going to mean we're going to have to work harder. Now, I don't blame you for that feeling. It's how we were trained. It's actually how we were educated to think. Let me show you what I mean. This is the picture of a fishing village in Scotland. Now, if you look very closely at this picture, you'll see a man stood on a van that's sinking. I don't want to be definite about this because I don't know for 100% certainty, but there is a bar just out of the picture here. Right? Now, I don't know if the man's had one too many beers and that's what's resulted in the picture here. We don't know. What we know is that he's in trouble. Now, what's happened next is some more of the men who were in the bar have come out of the bar to help. You may notice that there are no women in that picture. This is because no matter where you go in the world, this fascinates me, and I'm sure it's true here in Spain. When there's a physical problem, men seem to think it's their responsibility to solve the problem. Men are useless at everything unless there's a physical problem. And when there's a physical problem, men become like cavemen again. These men would have been in the bar drinking. Oh! Physical problem. Leave this to me. Little lady. Me man. Me solve problem. And they've gone out to help. And they've stood on the side and they have taken up the position of man problem solving pose. This. Recognize this? Luckily for them, there's a crane. Now, the crane is usually used to lift the fish out of the water, right, out of the boats. But on this occasion, they have decided to use the crane to lift the van out of the water. Problem solved. They can go back to the bar, have another drink, and celebrate their manly genius. Look, everything's going brilliantly. See? Look at that. Look now. There are twice as many men have arrived as were there before. Because now all the men want to take the credit for solving the problem. The group of men is building by the minute. More and more men are coming from the bar to celebrate how clever they are before they go back to the bar to have a beer to celebrate their genius. They're going to have a party. Everything's wonderful until this happens. Now, notice on this picture, all the men are now running away. Even the dog, I don't know if you can see the dog. The dog is a boy dog, and even he now is running in the opposite direction. Now, what they do next is really interesting, because this is the way we are taught to think when we're educated. These men have been educated to believe that if something isn't working, it's because they weren't trying hard enough. How many times were we as children told, if we put up our hands and we said, I don't understand, our teachers would say, well, you weren't listening hard enough. You weren't concentrating hard enough. It's your fault. You need to listen better. If when we take a test, we don't get the grades we wanted, how often do we hear people say to students, you didn't work hard enough, you didn't revise hard enough? Now that works all the way into adult life. Because then what happens, and I spend a lot of my time in corporations around the world, people think the way to show how much you care is to work harder than everybody else. And the people who are best at this are teachers. Teachers are desperate to show the world how much they care. So we spend our lives talking about how many hours we work. Have you noticed, on a Monday morning, you go back to school, and the first conversation you have with your friend at school is, how many hours did you work over the weekend? I worked all day Saturday. Did you? I worked all day Saturday and half of Sunday. Did you? I worked all of Saturday and all of Sunday. Did you? And then it builds, and somebody eventually says, I worked 8 days last week. Because we've been brought up to believe that if a system isn't working, it's because we weren't trying hard enough. It comes from the model created by Taylorism, which was the founding model of the industrial age. Now, here's the really interesting thing about my story. These guys were clearly educated properly at school, because what they do is they go and get themselves a bigger crane. Now, the tragedy of this story, because they're all back again. Have you noticed? The men are all back. They're now all saying to it, we just needed a bigger crane. Right? They're all back, ready to celebrate again. But the tragedy of this story is that I don't even need to show you the last slide in this story. What happens next is sadly obvious. But this is the way we're trained to think. In a world that's changing, it's not just a case of a world that needs to be more efficient, it's a world that's changing. The environment has changed and will continue to change. It's not about being more efficient. The global economy has changed and will continue to change. It is not about doing more of the same but working harder. The socio-ethnic crises around the world are growing and becoming more complex. They won't be solved by doing the same thing but harder. So we have to shift the way that we think. And then we have to start to help our children think differently too. The good news for us is that our children actually, particularly young children, understand the way we need to think better than we do. Let me explain to you what I mean. This is a dear friend of mine. Now, you may not recognize him, but he's very cool and a little bit famous. And I find now that as I get older and fatter and balder, I like to hang out with younger, cool people. I'm looking around the room now, seeing who I'm going to hang out with later, okay? I'm looking for young, cool people because I'm fat and bald. He is young and cool, so he's my friend. Now, this man's name is Sébastien Foucault. You might not recognize his name, but he is the founder of parkour, free running. He is my friend. I look younger now, don't I? My friend. Parkour. Me. He's particularly famous because, I don't know, how many of you saw the James Bond film Casino Royale, the first film that Daniel Craig made when he was Bond? If you saw that film, you'll remember the opening sequence where James Bond is chasing a bad guy over cranes and buildings. That's Sébastien, okay? He's also famous because he choreographed Madonna's last world tour. This is a seriously groovy guy, all right? And I hang out with him. A little while ago, we were walking through a city in Russia together. We were doing an event in a city called Yekaterinburg, which is famous because it's the city where the Tsar, Tsarina and their children were slaughtered at the end of the Russian Revolution. And it's an amazing city because it's one of those cities where you can see the history of the city through the architecture of the buildings. So as you walk through the city, you see the incredible opulent buildings of pre-communism. And then what you're seeing are the buildings that are functional with no character of the communist era. And now what you're seeing is an explosion in new buildings as the country becomes more confident and creative and innovative. So we're walking through the city together. And I'm like a child at a firework party, okay? I'm going, ooh, ah, oh, ooh. Seb said nothing. And we get to the end of our walk and we get back to our hotel. And I said to Seb, isn't this city incredible? And he looked at me and went, is it? I don't know. I said, come on, Seb. The buildings, aren't the buildings amazing? He said, I don't know. He said, I don't know why. He said, but ever since I was a child, I've never been interested in buildings. He said, I think it's because I grew up in a slum outside of Paris. And I grew up in a place where there were just tower blocks. And all I could see were these huge concrete buildings. He said, and to me, they were like a prison. They blocked out the light. And he said, I think it was from there that I became far more interested in the space between the buildings than the buildings themselves. He said, have you ever looked at the space created between buildings? Because the space created between buildings are amazing. They're beautiful. They're far more interesting than the buildings. The buildings are objects that block out the light. The buildings are objects that get in the way. So when I'm walking, he said, through an urban landscape, I'm thinking to myself, how can I use the spaces to get around the objects, over them, under them? How can I use the spaces to seek out the light? And as he was talking, I was thinking to myself, that's pretty much what we need to be teaching our children, don't you think? Because so many of us were taught to stop at objects. We weren't terribly well educated to look beyond objects or around them. How many of your colleagues, for example, when you talk with passion about how you would like to change education, How many of your colleague teachers turn round to you and say things like, oh, that's a lovely idea, but. Oh, we'd love to do that, but. And then they come out with all the buts. But the money, but the government, but the tests, but. You see, the thing with that is that's easy. We were trained to do that. It's a really easy thing to do. Oh, I'd love to, but. Oh, I'd love to talk to you tonight, but I can't because. Oh, I'd love to do that, but I can't. And then as we grow up, how many friends do you have who live with regret, who turn around and say, oh, when I was younger, what I really wanted to be was, but. We can't allow ourselves to think that way in a world that is changing as fast and as uncertainly as our world is. But more importantly than that, we can't allow our children to be brought up to think that way. Because if they do, they will have no future. I have to say, with regret, that one of the saddest things I saw as I travelled around the Western world in 2007, 2008, were the numbers of highly educated graduates who were sat around on the streets saying, I did everything you asked me to do. I went to school and studied hard. I went to university and I got a degree and a qualification because you told me that if I did those things, I'd definitely have a job, a good job that would pay great money for the rest of my life. And they were sat on street corners waiting for somebody to come along and tell them how to find an answer to the problem. We cannot allow more generations to be educated that way in a world where there are no certainties, in a world where the biggest graduate employers are no longer interested in whether you've been to university. PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, Penguin Publishers, these are companies now that have said they don't care if you've been to university, because they can teach you the technical skills that you need to do the job. What they're looking for are your behaviours and your personality. That's what they're going to be employing people on. And we cannot educate our children to develop those personalities if all we focus on is doing more of the same. What's that led to? Have a look at this. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Now, if I asked you how old you thought the person was who drew that picture, and it's not a trick question, my guess is that most of you would definitely not say that it was somebody over 50 or 40 or 30 or 20 or 10 or even 5. And you'd be right. The person who drew that picture is a very small child. But isn't it beautiful? Isn't it magnificent? Isn't there something free and wonderful about that picture? And you see, this is what I mean. Because very young children, in a really perverse way, already know how to think like successful citizens in the 21st and 22nd centuries. Which means there must be something that we do to them that takes away that extraordinary ability to think. Let me give you a piece of information, for example, that when I first heard it, I found staggering. Apparently, we learn somewhere between 70 and 75% of everything we learn in our lifetime before we're 5 years old. Now, don't confuse learning with knowing stuff. We might learn to know more stuff as we get older, but you think about the complexity of what we learn in the first 5 years of our lives. We learn to walk and talk. We learn to understand body language, vocal intonation, facial expression. We learn about sound and smell and colour and texture and taste. And we learn all of those things before we're 5. Our learning graph as human beings look like this: 0 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 to 18, 18 upwards. Now, isn't that tragic? What is it that happens to us? Where does it go? Well, I'll tell you where I think it starts. It starts on the day that you come home from work and your child has been drawing that picture on the table in the kitchen at home. And I mean on the table, on the kitchen at home. And as you come through the front door, they pick up their picture and they run to the door to come and meet you. And they say, "Mummy, look what I've done." And the first thing you say is brilliant. Because what you say is, "Oh, that's beautiful, darling. Oh, you're so clever. That's lovely." The next thing you say is the killer. "What is it?" That is the moment at which our children start to realize that stuff can only be of value if somebody else tells them it is. Because up until that point, our children learn because of their own curiosity, their own drive to discover, to explore, to question, to find out. And then we start saying to them, "Now it only matters if we tell you it's the right thing to have done." Think about those of you that are privileged enough to work with very young children in education. They are learning machines, aren't they? By the time they get to 16 or 17, they're turning round to you as the teacher saying, "What do I need to learn? How do I need to learn it? How are you going to test me to make sure I've done it the way you wanted me to do it?" Now that's really sad. And what it does is it leads on to something far more powerful as we get older. Have a look at that image. Isn't that beautiful? That's taken from a book called Earth from the Air. It's a book filled with images like that. I would suggest that every school represented in this room gets a copy of this book and spends time with your students and your colleagues, your staff, looking at these images. And again, we don't have time to do the exercise now, but I'm going to talk you through it. I'll often ask a room full of adults what that picture is. And what's really interesting is the behavior of the adults once you've asked that question. Most adults start to try and find the right answer because we've been taught to look for the answer that's correct. You've been taught to look for the answer that I want. So most of you now will apply logic to that picture. And you'll say, blue water, brown land, green, could be pollution, could be algae. Hold on a minute. I think it might be sulfur. I think it might be sulfur because that's a hot spring. And that looks like a lava flow. I think this might be somewhere volcanic. Now you're getting really excited because you're close to the answer. And then you're thinking, but there's a bridge. And the bridge is made of wood. And the people on the bridge are wearing shorts and t-shirts. So I think this is a tourist destination. I think it's somewhere that has volcanoes, that it's a tourist destination. And as I'm looking around the room now, I'm looking at the people that think they're very clever because they know the answer. In fact, some of you have already turned round to the person next to you and gone, I know where that is. And if you said Yellowstone National Park, you'd be right. And I'm looking around the room now at the smart kids, and they're sat there going, I told you. The interesting thing is, you show that picture to a room full of 5-year-olds, And the results and the answers you get are truly amazing. My favourite came from a group of 5-year-olds who said, "That's the face of an evil wizard." And it doesn't matter if you can see it or not. But isn't that brilliant? You see, the thing is, those kids haven't yet been told that they have to find somebody else's answer. And then you take it to the next level. So then what you do is you say to that room full of adults, "I'm going to split you up into groups of 4. And I'm going to give you 1 minute. And in that minute, in your groups of 4, you have to come up with a story for that picture. And then what I'm going to do after 1 minute is each group is going to choose somebody to come to the front and tell the rest of the room the story." Now, this is an interesting moment in the exercise, because at this point, when you're in your groups of 4, the first thing you do, and you do it for maybe half of the time, is argue about who is going to come to the front of the room and tell the story. Now, what's that about? Why do we do that as adults? We do it because we're scared of getting something wrong in front of the people we're surrounded by. And you are all successful professional people. But if I now said I'm looking for somebody in the room, I'm going to choose them to come up here and tell me their story, you would all start looking at your shoes. "Oh, I put these ones on this morning. Is he looking at me because I'm not looking at him? Ever." You do that exercise in a room full of kids under 5, and if any of you have had the privilege to work with those kids, you'll know what happens. "I need a volunteer! Me! I want to do it!" Every child in the room is wetting themselves, wanting to be the volunteer. That's brilliant. Now you tell me, wouldn't you love a room full of students in your lessons who thought that way and behaved that way? Because I would. I want the students in my room to be prepared to take the risks, to make the mistakes. You see, the story that that same group of 5-year-olds came up with in less than 1 minute was amazing. They went on to say, there is an evil wizard, but the evil wizard's in the top corner. You can't see them. But the evil wizard is sucking all of the colour out of the earth. And the people on the bridge are brave soldiers. And it's their job to stop the world from becoming black and white. Wow. Now let me tell you something else. This isn't silly stuff. This isn't some liberal educator just trying to be artsy and creative. Because I work with some of the world's biggest companies. And I'm telling you now that those companies would pay 6-figure salaries for people who can think that way. They're not interested in the people that find the right answer. They're interested in the people that create new answers. So what have we got to do to change things around? And by the way, have a look at that one. Isn't that beautiful? For those of you that need to know the right answer, that's date drying in the Cairo Basin. My favorite answer when I ask that question, that group of people are building bedding for a giant. So here's what we need to remember. When we're born and we start to learn, what happens to all of us is we start going to a casino. Now in that casino, we're going to play a game. We're going to play roulette. Think about your classroom. Every day your students come into your classroom. And every day, for them, it's like coming into a casino where they are going to gamble their self-esteem. Some of your students come in the morning with hundreds of poker chips. Those are the students that will keep putting up their hands and keep answering the questions. Those are the students that will interrupt you and say, I already know this. Because what you're doing as the teacher every single hour of every single day is you're rolling the wheel and spinning the ball. And you're saying to those students, come on, gamble with your self-esteem with me here. And you've got those high rollers, hundreds of poker chips, and then you have other students who walk into your classrooms every day, and they're coming into those rooms with only 1 or 2 poker chips. Now, the high rollers, they'll put their hands up, they'll throw 50 chips on red or 50 chips on black, 50 on odd, 50 on even. They might even throw 50 poker chips on a single number, because they've got hundreds of them. So if they get it wrong, it doesn't matter. They've got tons of self-esteem. But a lot of your kids are sat there with their 1 poker chip, and you say to them, come on, put your hand up. Answer the question. I'm sick of you never answering the question. Answer the question. And they're sat there looking at their poker chip and looking at the roulette wheel and thinking, I can't put this chip on red or black or odd or even, because if I lose, I've got no self-esteem left. So before we start banging children with stuff that they need to learn and shouting at them when they don't respond or don't want to participate in our lessons, let's remember that the first job of a teacher is to make sure that all of our children are playing with hundreds of poker chips. And that, by the way, goes for you too. How many of you are scared of trying something new because you might get into trouble? How many of you are looking at some of the incredible ideas being generated around education at the moment, thinking, well, I like it, but what if my children misbehave? What if my students don't get the results I need them to get? Is that really a reason not to do it? Is that the problem? Or is the problem that your own self-esteem isn't big enough yet? So we have 2 challenges based on the same issue. If we're going to successfully educate children for the future, we have to raise their levels of self-esteem, because they're going to have to take more risks and deal with more things going wrong in their lives than ever we did. And we can't simply tell them to do those things. We have to demonstrate those behaviors ourselves. So one of the things I think that we have to remember is that we have to reinvent the currency of clever. Logic and getting things right is not the currency of clever. When I look back on my time as a teacher, I think if I learnt nothing else in that time, I learnt this: that you learn nothing new when you get something right. All you do when you get something right is prove you knew it. You only ever learn something new at the point of a mistake, or at the moment when you realize you don't know something or you can't do something. Yet think about what we reward in our schools and our classrooms. We reward the children who get things right. I went to my son's parent-teacher consultation evening about 5 years ago. He was still in primary school. And we went to see his teacher. And my wife and I sat outside his classroom door waiting for the appointment with the teacher. And she'd left his books outside for us to look at. And I was looking at his math books with my wife. And there were pages and pages of right answers. There were ticks everywhere. Now, you can imagine that I am a nightmare as a parent coming to teacher evening. I can imagine most of you would want to run in the opposite direction if I was coming in to talk about my son's progress with you as a teacher. My wife knows this, by the way. My wife is a school principal. And usually, when we go to parent consultation evenings, she holds my hand under the table. And if I even move my lips as though I'm about to speak, she usually breaks the knuckles on my hand, right? On this particular evening, she made the mistake of not holding my hand. So we walked in to see the teacher. And she was lovely, don't get me wrong. A young teacher, very caring, very enthusiastic. And we sat down and she did the thing that we all do as teachers. Oh, Andrew, he's a lovely boy. Oh, he's a lovely boy. I'm thinking, you haven't seen the mess in his bedroom, right? He's a lovely boy. I said, oh, good, thank you. He's getting on ever so well. You know how we talk to parents like they're stupid? We've got to make sure we don't do that at parents' evening. Oh, he's getting on ever so well. We're very happy with your child. It's like, what? He's very good at math. I said, is he? She said, yes. Have you seen his books outside? I said, yes. She said, aren't they wonderful? I said, why? My wife at this point was going, give me your hand. I said, why? She said, because have you seen all the correct answers? He really understands. Isn't it amazing? I knew he'd do well this year. All those ticks, it's wonderful. I said, is it? She said, I can tell. There's something you're not quite happy with. And I said, well, now you mention it, there is. I have to say, what came out of my mouth next is not nice, and I'm not proud of it, okay? I said, I do have one question for you. And she said, yes? I said, why are you wasting my son's time? And she said, I'm sorry, what do you mean? I said, it seems to me that day after day he's proving to you that he knows this stuff. Now that may be fine for a test, but he's not learning anything. All he's doing is showing you that he knows it. She said, well, what do you want to see? I said, I want to see crosses. I want to see mistakes. Because when I see mistakes, I'll see a boy who's learning. And I want him to learn that actually, if he's going to keep learning through his life, he needs to be prepared to keep making mistakes. Now, one of the really interesting things about this, and I work a lot now in high-performance sports and with high-performance graduates in major companies, they are all terrified of making mistakes. And as a result, very few of them ever achieve their potential. Because when they were children, they were so used to getting things correct, they don't know how to get stuff wrong. And when they're in really competitive environments, competing against people who are as good, if not better than they are, they can't cope. They go to pieces. So resilience is probably the greatest gift that we can bestow on our children. Now, I'm coming to the end of the session, so I want to finish at past so we have time for questions, or if you want to throw stuff at me, anything like that. But I want to finish with a story that I think sums up the challenge we face. So, as well as meeting and hanging out with Sebastian, I have an even more famous friend, who I now call a friend. But when I met him for the first time, it wasn't such an easy meeting. All right. Now, a few years ago, I got the opportunity to meet one of my heroes, a man that I believe has genuinely been part of changing the world. I was invited about 2 years, maybe a bit more now, a few years ago, to give a speech in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And I have to be honest, I wasn't sure that I should go on moral grounds. It was a very difficult decision. You see, the event wasn't for teachers, but it was for an audience of 4,000 Saudi residents. And the conference was about empowerment. The problem with the event was that 2,000 of the people who wanted to attend the event weren't allowed in the main room with me because they were women. So I had to say, I was a bit, should I go or shouldn't I? But I'm a very weak man. And the thing is, the organisers made me a promise. You see, the first thing they did was they told me who the other main speaker was. And it was this guy who'd been a hero of mine. And then they said to me, look, if you come, we'll let you have 5 minutes on your own with this hero. And I'm like, I'm coming. I don't care about the moral issue now. Bring me on. So I went out to Saudi Arabia, but before I arrived, I knew I was going to get 5 minutes with this man, my hero, a man who's changed the world. So I worked through 2 things, because I wanted the meeting to be perfect, because I thought I'm never going to get this chance again. So the first thing I did, and I overthink things, the first thing I did was I spent a week practicing how to say hello. I mean, it's a serious, don't laugh, it's a serious issue, right? I'm meeting a hero. You have to get it right. I mean, you don't want to go nuts, do you? Oh my God, you don't want to be stupid. That looks ridiculous, right? You don't want to be, do you want to be too formal, like hello? That daft. Do you want to go out and be too casual, like yo, boom, yo, high five, right? You've got to be careful. So I practiced on my son. He thought I was mad too, by the way. But I got my hello just right, okay? And then I thought to myself, I'm going to have 5 minutes with a man who's changed the world. I'm going to have time to ask him one question. So then I really thought to myself, you need to work out the question. Because you don't want to be stood there trying to work it out when you're with him. You've only got 5 minutes. So I got my question, I practiced it on people, I checked that it was a good question, right? It was a good question. I got to Saudi Arabia, I did my speech, I had my hello ready, I had my question ready, and I'm being taken to the speaker's room where he's waiting. And as we're moving towards the speaker's room, my heart starts beating, so I'm about to meet a hero, right? So I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to meet one of my heroes. As we got towards the door of the room that he was in, I remember thinking to myself, don't be an idiot. Practice your hello. So in my head, I was going through my hello, right? I got my hello, 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 right? I was ready. And I was practicing the question. So I got to the door and I was confident, right? And then the door opened and my hero was stood on the other side of the door. Now my hero is, let me find my thing, here we go. My hero, at this time my hero is Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, right? So the door opens and Big Woz is stood opposite me. And all the things I'd practiced just went to pieces, right? Because all that came out of my mouth as I see him on the other side of the door is, and I can't believe this to this day, is, oh my God, it's you! Right? And I walk in like, oh my God, I can't believe it, it's actually you! And he's like, yeah. So, you know, sometimes when you're going through an experience in your life, you kind of move out of your own body and you watch yourself do stuff, right? So now I'm hovering above my own body, thinking, you idiot, right? And then I'm saying to myself, now you've blown the hello, but as long as you get the question right, you can win this back. So I start going through the question. And I get up to him. And he must be used to this, right? He's a very shy, lovely man. And he just went, hi. At which point I put out my hand, I got my question, but as our hands touched, I went completely blank. There was nothing there. And all that came out of my mouth, I have 5 minutes with a man who's changed the world. And all that comes out of my mouth, and I cannot believe that I'm telling you this, all that came out of my mouth was, can I have a selfie? But But what made it worse was as we looked up into my phone, I realised it was a bloody Samsung. So, I thought I'd blown it, right? I really did. He was great. He just went, yeah. I'll show it to you later if you come and find me. I've got it on my phone. I now have an Apple, by the way, just so that you know. Just in case. I was so devastated. And you know, like you think to yourself, how am I going to tell my friends back home? Because they're all going to want to know what he said to the question. And I'm going to say, I don't remember. I don't know. Anyway, I had a moment of redemption which could never have been planned. Because to my amazement, when I boarded my plane in Riyadh to fly back to London, who should be sat next to me? I was so excited. You should have seen him. He was like, oh my God. He put on his headphones and it was like, oh God, you can't do this to me. This is a lunatic you've sat me next to, right? Anyway, I kind of managed to relax myself after a couple of free whiskeys. And we started talking. And it turns out, which is not surprising, he's an extraordinary man with a lot of interesting things to say, and particularly about education. So let me tell you a bit about his story, and then I promise we'll take some questions. He said, you know, Richard, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, he said, I was one of those children that some people would describe as dysfunctional. He said, I was one of those children that just didn't know how to play with other kids. I didn't know how to make relationships with other children. So I was the child that at playtime would end up on the playground having a fight or an argument with somebody. Not because I was aggressive or unpleasant, but because I was clumsy and I just didn't know what to do. He said, and it's funny because when I look back on my life, he said, I think it was the first time, he said, I remember sitting in the back corner of my classroom. He said, I liked to sit in the back corner because I wanted to be invisible. I didn't want anybody to be able to look at me. I wanted to be out the way. He said, when I turned up at school every day, I used to think to myself, just survive, Steve. Just survive. I wonder how many Steves you've got in your classrooms, by the way. Just survive. He said, I used to sit at the back of my classroom and look out of the window. And I used to look out of the window and think to myself, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm older, but what I do wish is that when I get older, I'd love to be able to make the world better for people like me. He said, and at that time, he said there were two ideas really that I had. He said one was to be an engineer because my father was an engineer and engineers change the world. He said the other was to be a teacher. He said, because I remember at that time in my life, I had a teacher. She was amazing. She was an extraordinary human being. He said, when I was in her company, she used to make me feel clever, intelligent, funny. I used to feel like a normal person. That's the power we have as teachers. And remember that tomorrow when you're sat with that student, that if you treat that student right, that student could go on to be the next Steve Wozniak. So, he said, but as you know, as I grew up, everyone knows the history. I went into engineering, we created Apple. He said, but what people might not know is that I left Apple in 1987. And when I left Apple, he said, you know, I was one of the luckiest human beings on earth. He said, because I, as a young man in 1987, would never have to work another day in my life. He said, and I remembered at that time, because he said, actually, that's a very scary thing. He said, and I remembered at that time my other ambition. He said, so what the world doesn't know about me is that for the next 7 years, I went and taught full-time in a local state school and I taught technology. How cool would that be, by the way? That you turn up at the beginning of a new term and you're introduced to the new technology teacher who's Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, right? That's cool. So, I said, so what do you know about education then, Steve? Because you've kind of lived on both sides. He said, well, I'll tell you the first thing. He said, the world makes a very big mistake when it talks about education. Because when it talks about education, the world seems to be obsessed with what we should teach our children. He said, what we teach is almost totally irrelevant. He said, but how we learn, now that's what will define success. I said, well, where does that come from? He said, well as my time as a teacher, he said, Steve Jobs and I felt it long before that. He said, when we first set up Apple, we had no idea. He said, people started throwing money at us really quickly. And the really scary thing about that was that meant we were going to have to employ people. And Steve and I were working out of his stepdad's garage. And we were just mucking about with technology at the time. He said, you know, the first thing we ever made to actually sell was a voice-changing device that we sold to our friends so that they could make joke phone calls. He said, but things happened really fast. And that meant we were going to have to employ people. And he said, that was scary. He said, so one night we went out to a bar to talk about the kind of person we were looking for. And he said, you know, there's a lot of rubbish written about Steve Jobs. A lot of it is myth. A lot of it just isn't real. He said, but that night he said something for the first time that is real. And he said, I remember it clearly because it was the first time he said it. We were sat having a beer, and he said, Steve Jobs turned round to me and said, you know what, Woz? If we're to make this company work, we can't make stuff. Because if we make stuff, we'll be dead inside of 2 years. He said, if this company is to last, we have to keep creating things. We have to keep giving the world stuff they don't know they need yet. He said, and if we're going to do that, hiring traditionally clever people is not going to be enough. He said, look at the big tech companies already in the valley. Most of them are already dying. Most of them were the biggest companies in the world, and they're dying away. He said, so hiring the clever people, that's easy. And it was for them. They were in the middle of Silicon Valley. The cleverest people in the world were heading to Silicon Valley at that time. The smartest scientists, mathematicians, electronics engineers, they were all heading to Silicon Valley. And Stanford University, the world's most technologically advanced university, was there in the valley, pumping out clever people. He said, we need something different. So that night, they came up with a mantra, a promise, a hiring promise. And he said, you know, Rich, it must work because Apple still use it today as a core part of their hiring philosophy. And when he told me what it was one of those moments that almost sums up Apple itself. It was a beautifully simple statement. But when you climb underneath the words, it's an incredibly complicated challenge. And it's the challenge I want to leave you with this evening. Because this is what they said. At Apple, we will never employ anyone who needs managing. We will never employ anyone who needs managing. Now just think about that for a minute. Education almost trains our kids to be managed. We ourselves as a profession wait to be managed. So 2 parts of the challenge. Firstly, how as a profession do we grow the confidence to allow ourselves to manage our own profession? And 2, how do we create an education system which ensures our children are able to manage themselves? If we can do that and we can do it well, we will create an education system that is worthy of our students. Thank you very much indeed.
Muchas gracias. Recordarles que mañana tenemos aquí de nuevo a Richard Gerver con la masterclass Si yo puedo, tú también puedes, cómo cambiar la educación desde mi trabajo como profesor, de 6 a 9 de la tarde aquí en el Patio de la Infanta. Y la semana que viene les esperamos en la conferencia Educando cerebros, neurociencia y educación, y en la masterclass Monolingües y bilingües, ventajas cognitivas del uso de más de una lengua, que dirigirá John Duñabeitia. Muchísimas gracias a todos y buenas noches.